All right, we're back. My bad. Missed a lot. Good content there.
It's a punch-in?
Yeah, we punching.
Okay.
Yeah. Nah. So yeah, there was an issue with the record button. That's my fault. This is why we need an engineer. But so basically we lost all that.
Everything?
Yeah, everything. It's all good. Maybe that wasn't for the people.
Clark. Hey, you lucky Clark County ain't here, boy, from Atlanta.
Why?
Clark County. You don't remember that rapper?
Nah.
He beat people up and they fuck up in the engineering.
Oh.
You don't remember that episode?
I remember that from.
Yeah. I remember.
He got up and walked out and
from Atlanta.
Yeah.
Oh man, we're looking back at the last decade. This is a New Year episode. Ad Bros, introduce yourselves again.
Okay, this is AD. Glad to be here. I'm not doing this 2020 beyond, but I just did it, so whatever.
Easy Rose, man. Get your paper, stay out these people way.
And you got friendly podcaster here, Tony Stallion, here to capture the content and put us out there in the world. So yeah, man. I mean, basically, before we jumped on the mic and when we were on the mic and it was recorded, we were talking about creativity in the last 10 years. And I'm going to try to recap it if I can remember it all. But, the first thing I wanted to talk about in terms of ad news, which is a little bit of bad news, is in the last decade, there were about 10 agencies that didn't make it in the last 10 years. And actually, you know what? I'm not even going to go into the names of the agencies. I'm going to
they're not cutting the check.
Yeah, and also I'm just going to put a link in the bio.
They broke anyway.
I'll put a link in the bio where people could check it out if you're interested. But the interesting part that we were talking about is new ideas and innovation,
right?
Which I think is a key. And new ideas, innovation, and timing, I think, are key parts, especially of this podcast. And it's easy to say in retrospect, but AD, I remember you mentioned it before we jumped on the mic that you were saying that you're getting a little bit older.
Yeah,
your jab isn't hitting like it used to, and you're running low on ideas.
It's a natural thing, man. And look, I'm 43, and I still come up with ideas, but my cadence is not as sharp as it used to be because of life shit, other things, different variables. But more than anything, man, your ideas have to be reflective of the moment, right? And I just think for anybody who's great, you just need to keep, new young people around you so you can always have fresh ideas. Miles Davis did that. Miles Davis always kept a new group of young musicians around him to reinvent his sound. And anybody, going forward, some of the greats in the past, they always kept a flock of new people around. And I just think if you think about...
Kanye does that a lot.
Well, yeah, not just him, but, Ye, Jay, too.
Jay with the rock.
You wouldn't... Yeah. Any of those guys, for the most of now.
Yeah.
Except for some of these MC motherfuckers, they always just want to be in their own little island and, they're kind of narcissistic. So if you think about, advertising, branding, brands, companies, look, their bloodline is always going to be like the new employee, right? And the reality of it is, if you want new ideas, you got to keep new people around. Also, you got to think about, if a company's been known for doing one specific thing or a couple of different things specifically, then maybe that company need to either spawn off a new company to do something uniquely different or acquire, or maybe some new companies need to just...
That's actually a good point. I think Google did that.
Yeah,
with ABC.
With Alphabet.
Yeah, Alphabet. And they did it too when, a lot of people don't... Oh, some people do remember when the Google glasses kind of...
That shit was trash, bro.
Flopped. But they did it... I can't remember if they did it through Google or if they...
They put it back.
Well,
they sent it back to Alphabet,
company.
right?
Okay, yeah.
And I think they really want to.
So they don't really get the blame for the flop.
Well, yeah, they try to make it a consumer product that wasn't ready for the market,
yeah.
right? And maybe it needs to be more about the timing thing. It's not ready.
So that's a good point too, because again, we mentioned this before the mics went off. in looking back at the last decade and looking forward to the new decade in terms of agencies and creativity, do we need new agencies? Do we need new products? Or do we need new consumers? I
don't know if you need new consumers. Consumers always going to be there.
Yeah.
It's just going to change,
But do you need a new brand in order to have new ideas out there and have innovation in the creative market? That's kind of like the question.
I'll say yes and.
That's positive.
I think it just depends on like the problems of the time.
Yeah.
Right? Like things are created by way of whether it be clutter, confusion, or just like things aren't happening efficiently enough.
Yeah.
So then you start to pivot away from the norm and say like, wow, like if I'm taking a step back, how do I fix this? Right. So I think just depending on, I mean, we talked about Uber, right?
Yeah.
People couldn't catch a cab. That's reality. So it's like someone said.
Certain people couldn't catch a cab. You know what I'm saying?
Well, yeah.
Danny Glover.
Okay. But, the reality is now it's just a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
And now it's like, yo, I can, within 2 taps of my thumb, I can hail a cab. And now the people who are running the industry are in a position where they either have to like figure out like, all right, do I join this Uber conversation or do I just fade out?
Well, just to jump in, I think talking about Uber, I think Uber did a great job of fixing 2 problems, because for the consumer not being able to catch a cab, but for the driver not being able to afford a medallion, because a medallion
it's like $1 million, right?
Because they told people like, yo, with this medallion, you're the only person who can drive a cab in New York City.
Right. So I think it's a
New York
thing
City,
of
for example. Yeah.
commonality. Like what is a problem that all of us share? We all share the same problem. All right, how do we go about fixing it? From there, you're going to put your dollars behind that, or you're going to, whether either as a consumer, you're going to purchase against that, or as an investor, you're going to put your dollars behind it and support it.
Right.
I mean, it's funny because you look at like all the disruptor businesses that came out in the last decade, right? So that's everything from, the new Amazon to Spotify to Netflix streaming to, any ride share to, anything around a smartphone, whatever, right?
Yeah.
None of those companies or those experiences were created by, most of those companies were not created by the traditional company that preceded them, right?
Yeah.
So Uber was, you thought like maybe the car companies would create an Uber, or Netflix would have been created by, I don't know, some network, right? Or, when it comes down to food delivery, like why the big grocers just couldn't get that solved, right? So if you think about, going back to your point about new ideas, advertising, kind of helping brands to come up with new ideas, it seemed to me that was a big missed opportunity, not just for the brands, but also for the agencies. I remember working for an agency, a multicultural agency, back in the days when I first moved to New York. The guy who ran the digital department asked us for a bunch of new ideas, and I basically gave him a bunch of ideas around like a consumer engagement, like a product, right?
Yeah.
Like app ideas. He still wanted advertising ideas, and I just told him, I feel like it's an old model because it's gonna not be sustainable going forward. And long story short, I feel like agencies back in their early teens had an opportunity to create these new businesses that are now thriving.
Yeah.
Without the agencies, without the businesses, but
Yeah.
they decided to just more or less, stick with the old model, which
Yeah.
was I'm going to get a check from this client, and we're going to let this client pimp me out, or I pimp them out, but we tricking each other, right? Where why agencies and brands was tricking each other, these disruptor companies came out of nowhere.
Changing.
The world was changing, and these disruptive companies came out of nowhere and ate all that cake.
Well, that's why it's interesting to see what the next decade is going to lead to for advertising innovation. But what you guys just described, what you about to say, Rose?
No. All I was gonna say is, to your point, I think that is just the reality of the disconnected.
Yeah.
Right. So you have.
I'm glad you said that because it's going to add.
Yeah. So you have the person who has the bag per se, And it's like, all right, I'm gonna look the other way.
Yeah.
I don't want no issues. I don't want no problems.
Don't shake the boat.
It's BAU, business as usual.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But then you have the people who say like, no, there's a real problem. Like, here's how we fix this problem. And then you're like,
here's a pain
listen,
point.
man, I don't want to stick my toe into that water. I don't want to lean in.
See,
let's just keep things flowing.
You know what both of you guys just described to me?
What?
The Wire.
Absolutely.
And honestly, like, if you haven't seen it by now, go see it.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because when you guys are talking about brands and everything, it just reminded me of like Stringer Bell and everybody who just did it. They cornered the market and they were like, you know what, we're making the money, we're gonna do whatever we want. Also, I don't know if y'all saw Top Boy. It's kind of remind me of that too. But yeah, then the young dude Marlo came out of nowhere and was like, you know what, we're gonna change this game a little bit. And
Strings tried to change it though. He did.
He tried to go. He
tried
tried to go
evolve
straight.
it. He tried to evolve it, but Avon just want to stick on them
But
corners,
I think
bro.
but to me, it's just like, yo,
So Avon, is he
young,
a brand?
you got a young.
Is he the brand? And maybe String was trying to push things a
Yeah,
little. He's
yeah.
the agency kind of thing.
Yeah.
Right? And Marlo was the disruptor.
Marlo is like I would say he's probably like a 72 and Sunny. He's like a agency that comes up with some wild, crazy
Because he's
ass
outside,
ideas.
right? And I guess String is
And
internal.
he's willing to take the risk and
Right.
do something different and crazy.
Right.
Yeah. And I just think, people just get complacent, honestly.
Brands
They
too?
got, yeah. So yeah, I mean, diving into the episode real quick. What I wanted to do is kind of like look back at the decade as a whole, and then kind of dive into the first half of the decade, and then kind of break into the second half of the decade. So I think looking back at the early 2010s, there's a lot of crazy shit that happened that year. Actually, now that like when you look back, you're like, damn, like all this shit happened.
Mm-hmm.
Musically, a lot of, just thinking about music and entertainment. Obama was president at the time. What else was going on? Musically, because I just have a bunch of music notes here, because I feel like music puts you in this time capsule and you look back, you're like, damn, I was doing this at that moment.
Right.
But like some of the top hits that was out during that time was that's when Katy Perry Firework dropped.
I didn't care about that. But she did a thing.
Adele, Rolling in the Deep. And let's see, Drake had just dropped. BMF, Rick Ross joint had just dropped. And then Kanye dropped Runaway, and then that's when LeBron. Oh, and then just to jump to one of the like kind of highlight, and this is all entertainment stuff.
Right.
LeBron had just went to Miami, start the Big Three.
Big Three, right.
So,
but that inspired culture. That was culture at the time, right?
Yeah, exactly. When you look at some of these things and how they influence the next 10 years, we could just pull like one or two of those things out. Or we could look at sports, like LeBron going to Miami. We could use that as an example, how that influenced basketball for the next 10 years.
It did.
And how people kind of create teams, or how you put a team together.
It actually changed the model at the time. I guess it was unprecedented, right? Because at that time,
well, I felt like they did it on the Celtics, but they didn't announce it.
No,
that way. You about to break that down? All right, go ahead.
Take the ride with me, bro.
All right.
Right? It's unprecedented because a lot of the older cats, like the legends, were kind of like befuddled or baffled by it because no player has ever left their team in their prime.
Yeah.
When the Celtics came together, they had about 3 or 4 more good seasons, and then they were just like kind of done. Like KG, Paul Pierce, they weren't the same players that they were before.
Right.
Like LeBron said, no, I'm gonna come through and take a line with 2 other young cats, and then we're gonna win these championships. And then people started making those comparisons like, oh, well, Michael Jordan would never do that, so on and so forth. Like, a lot of players done it, but it was like at the tail end of their career. So, like, now from there, what do we have today? Like, KD left, which is kind of different. But KD left Oklahoma City
Yep.
and went to Golden State, which was already a powerhouse, and he won his championship. So
He won 3 with them, right?
he won 2 with them.
Yeah.
But like in that run, I think they won.
And they needed him too.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah.
So I mean, and I think it's kind of changed sports a little bit because like now you have these guys that are saying like, you know, it's not about sticking with a team anymore and being like loyal to the team. Like we're loyal to the bag, and then we're trying to be loyal to our friends that we might have played AAU basketball with, or I just want to be these locations and family. So yeah,
that's true.
Or they're loyal to their fan base. So it's almost like LeBron. You're going to be a LeBron fan regardless of what team he's on, right? So at any given moment, LeBron can engage his audience, especially through social, without the NBA, without a publicist, without a marketing team, and they're just gonna follow LeBron, whatever, right? So it's not even about LeBron in Cleveland, but it's like LeBron has the brand, and whatever you do, you're gonna follow, right? Yeah. And that was, and it's funny, the teams was kind of, when I say teams, I'm not talking about like you know NBA. I'm talking about the actual 20 teams. That was like the decade of the follow. You follow what you like.
Yeah.
So if you like LeBron, you're gonna follow him.
So real quick, go ahead.
No, I mean that's a really good point. Like you followed them, and also too, although social media was out before that, but I think around that time, like you felt like you got to really know these entertainers, and you really get to see them in goofy situations or really cool situations. Where before, like if you saw Michael Jackson, like you saw Michael Jackson one time, you're like, wow, that's Michael Jackson.
MTV, ABC, certain time of day, and somebody had to record if you didn't see it live.
Right.
So based on what you guys are saying, I'm gonna take this opportunity to brand 2010 as the year of rebranding.
What a decade.
What do you mean?
Oh, you're talking about the specific team?
Oh, yeah, 2010. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So, because if you think about LeBron going to Miami, that was him rebranding from the Cavs. If you think about Kanye's Runaway, which we're not going to dive into because that could be a whole hour
because that whole album
that's
was
rebranding.
It was a rebrand.
Yeah.
It was I wouldn't even say a comeback, but he called it an apology album.
Yeah.
Because of the shit with Taylor Swift.
And then also just one other thing, politically, just pulling up, and we'll post this in the notes too. According to onthisday.com, in December, there was a repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy in the U.S. military. So, like, you know, I think that adds to the point of a lot of people, again, looking in hindsight, because I guess they weren't purposely trying to do this. A lot of people were rebranding. People were trying to change the narrative of how you saw them originally.
Car companies was trying to rebrand,
which I think is interesting.
I mean, think about it.
Dive into that.
Like the car companies went through their spiel in the late 00s with like the crash, and then Obama had to kind of come in and help them
because people weren't buying cars.
Because the cars was like went through their same issues like the housing, right? And they needed a bailout, and we bailed them out as a taxpayer. But they kind of had to go through like a rebrand themselves to a certain degree, right? Because, you know, some of these car companies was consolidating and buying other car companies, you know? So that was a rebrand, definitely with car industry, even with banks. I agree.
Yeah. All right. So moving on, 2011. And also, as I go through this list, I just start to again, looking at it in hindsight, but it's just like things that started out the beginning of the decade that become these big kind of grandiose I wouldn't even say ideas, but pieces of culture that we look at. Right. So 2011, Game of Thrones premieres April, which became a great. I mean, I didn't watch Game of Thrones much until close to the end.
I didn't get into it until
but I know
2013, 2014.
Yeah, which is crazy because of how big the brand became and how big the show became on HBO later on in life. One of the note, Bin Laden was killed in 2011, which was kind of a long-standing thing after 9/11, which we kind of talked about earlier. But yeah,
would you say some people found closure in that?
Yeah, I think so. I think
or felt the sense of closure.
I would say Americans probably more so New York, people from New York, and people who anybody who was directly associated with like the Iraq War and like 9/11 probably felt that, like a sense of like, all right, this is done. or this is finished.
Yeah.
Even though we still on records.
I'm not gonna touch anything Bin Laden.
Yeah.
I got my own whatever.
Right.
I'm cool on it. I'm not gonna say anything about that.
Nah, that's cool.
Yeah.
It's just something that happened.
But that was
year.
a milestone.
What else happened?
I mean, it did
let's
add to
pull up this
Obama's
list.
brand.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Well,
It did.
that's a good point.
It added to his brand.
That's a good way of making it not a positive, but
Well,
I
you know,
think-
'cause, wait,
but
you know.
but it added to. That's a good point because I guess a lot of people maybe thought of Obama as like nice guy, blah blah
Yeah.
blah, and then that added to I guess I don't know how to put it, but
Well, I mean, look.
like he ain't afraid to push the button.
No, he's not, because it was
I
more
guess
drone
is
attacks.
what you could say.
You had more drone attacks during Obama's presidency than any other president. However, there wasn't a whole lot of drones in any other presidency prior to Obama. So he was just using the technology at his disposal at the time. So
Right.
you know, Twitter fingers.
Well, there's
turned
one other
to
thing that
red
happened that
deals.
year that I don't want to touch on.
Well, go for it. What?
Gaddafi died that year, actually. Gaddafi.
Damn.
And I'm not gonna name everybody who died in every year, but just only like big names. Amy Winehouse and also Steve Jobs passed in 2011.
It's funny you say that, because everybody feel like that's when Apple took this tipping point of going from being innovative to plateauing to decline. I'm gonna be controversial.
All right, go ahead.
I feel like
And then we're gonna jump into 2020.
it goes back to the timing thing, right? We like to talk about timing, and what Steve was very good at was curating technology. He's good at that. That's what really was his
He was an
innovation.
orchestrator.
He
as
orchestrated
they
and
said in the
curated
movie.
and knew how to sell technology, right? But if you think about like from 2007 to 2011, I mean, what's that? That's what 4-year kind of you know, like space there. Every iPhone, even to this day, always came out with like an incremental update. So, and the way that he sold it was that it was being innovative. Like the first iPhone didn't even have copy and paste, but it came. No, it didn't. 'Cause I had the first one. You could not copy and paste on the first iPhone. The following year with the iPhone 3G, right? It had copy and paste on it. Now, you know, that was seen as being innovative, and he sold it as innovation. So what I feel like what Steve did very well was take these small incremental like advances on a phone and just sell it. Because a lot of that technology existed even before the device was even like actually created. So from 2011 and beyond, maybe the problem with Apple is that it didn't know how to tell a story around its incremental technology. It just put it out there. Whereas Steve knew how to tell a story, and it felt like innovation. So if you think about us as like, you know, creatures of habit, the one thing that we like are great narratives. We love that shit.
Yeah, humans
right? We love
survive
narratives,
off of
right?
narratives.
And it's funny thing about narratives, they're all telling the same story. It's just the narrative is told differently, or it's packaged up differently,
Right.
or you're engaging an audience in a different way. But typically, the narratives are almost the same. Like every religion, it's more or less telling the exact same story. It just engaged differently, right?
Boy meets girl, rags to riches,
There you
seeking vengeance.
Love laws, whatever,
Yeah.
right? You know, or redemption, some shit, right? So if you think about what Steve was good at, was telling a good brand story and getting you to buy into it. The problem with, I guess, most companies post, well, at least with Apple post 2011, they forgot how to tell a good story. They knew how to make a good product. But again, a product is just good as the story behind the product. Otherwise,
That is true.
It's just, oh, it should fix things or it orders something. But if it don't have a good, compelling story, then you don't care.
Yeah.
You know?
Okay. So moving on. 2012. Damn, now that I look at all this shit, I pull out a lot of negative stuff. But it all affects, I think, things down the line to come. So 2012, WikiLeaks incident happened.
Yeah.
Kim Jong-un was appointed supreme leader. And, well, I know I said I wouldn't say this every year, but all right. 3 people who passed in 2012.
It's like an obituary here. All of a
Rodney
sudden.
King, Whitney Houston died. Rodney King, Whitney Houston, and Adam, I think he said his name is Yacht.
Yeah.
From Beastie Boys. They all passed in 2012. I think just kind of wrapping up 2012 because there's nothing really positive.
Well, now look at 2012 because I want to hear Rose's point on this, right? Like,
that's when I first got into advertising.
Really interesting. Because I think I started working at UW like the following year in 2011.
Yeah.
So it was 2011 when I started working at UW. The early, I guess, teens felt more like, I don't know. It almost felt like everything about social and online started to kind of turn on itself just a little bit. Like, and it kind of did begin with WikiLeaks. You know, like this idea that if social media can do some positive shit,
Right.
and digital can do positive things, where's the opposite of that?
So that's a good point. Looking back, can we say that WikiLeaks is kind of the start of everything you put out digitally can be used against you?
Yeah.
If you want to if you want to take a nugget out of 2012, we can maybe say that that's the start of it, even though it wasn't necessarily social media, but it was stuff that you're putting out digitally that's being used against you.
The chicken coming home to roost.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Yeah. A little bit. Jumping into 2012 to 2013, I think that's when a lot of us started working together in advertising, started to build the unit, Wu-Tang of podcasts.
Right.
All right. Jumping into 2013. Let me see. And again, these are just high level thoughts of what, not even thoughts, high level facts of what happened according to onthisday.com, which aren't paying us, but hey, I'm using them for reference. And a lot of it's entertainment. Orange is the New Black premiered on Netflix. I never watched the show, but
Me either.
I heard it was really good. And Frozen drops 2013. In hindsight, anybody who got kids now, they know Frozen. I mean, anybody who want to drop a line to their lady, let it go. You know, that's all you gotta say. Let it go. Lance Armstrong admits to doping, which is crazy because if you think about all the Tour de France he won and his brand and everything he got based off winning.
Yeah, that whole Live Strong thing, right?
And he was taking steroids.
I mean, but okay, let's ask this question though. Like, but he wasn't the only one. He was just the only one.
He got caught.
He the one that got caught. And he had the biggest name. I mean, let's be honest, bro. Like, if you really think the world run off ethics, morals, and code, you're fucking dumb, right?
Not capitalism.
It's capitalism, and that's with any industry, like from football to blockchain to whatever that shit is, man. Everything is gonna have like people who's gonna cheat. That's just the way it is, right? It is. It's true. Like, so if you really think everything is running off fairness, life is not fair. Just fucking be real about it, right? So, you know, he got caught. Now the question is, how did he get caught? Because there's a whole movie called, I think, Icarus on Netflix that kind of talked about like the doping scandals, not necessarily with him in particular, but you know, just the whole industry, especially with the Russians. Hey, Russians, don't fuck with me. I'm just saying that shit is on Netflix. Don't fuck with me. I'm just saying,
please
it's already
do not
out
hack
there, right?
the pod,
right? So,
I'm just
saying it was a Russian dude, scientist motherfucker, who basically talked about how the Russians would actually, you know, gamify or, you know, the whole doping thing, like how they would actually get around that shit. Like, it was a whole like industry around doping, and you know, if you think about like Lance Armstrong, well, he got caught. So the question is, how he got caught, why he got caught, and what happened.
Well, here's the thing. I'm gonna pull an AD on you.
Pull it.
Not even focusing on how he got caught, but let's focus on
the why.
How, not even the why, how, taking the morals out of it, how his legacy led to his branding.
Yeah.
Since we're marketing people, let's talk about the branding.
Yeah, the Live Strong thing. Right?
Live Strong, to my knowledge, hasn't really been super affected by it. I mean, I don't have any facts behind it.
They separate themselves from it.
They're just opinion.
Yeah.
But if you think about what Rose just said earlier, not rags to riches. What would his story be?
Redemption?
Coming of age?
Coming
maybe?
of age, right.
Like if you think about, he was a cancer survivor.
Falling from grace.
Well, I mean, it probably ended falling from grace, but it started out because he was a cancer survivor. Right. He had testicular cancer. He came back and won the Tour de France. So it's like, do people want to believe the brand story to believe in the brand more than the truth. Does the truth matter? I guess is the point
Truth is relative.
of using this in marketing a brand. Unless FCC comes and shuts your ass down,
right?
Does the truth matter?
I think it's relative. I don't know if it matters to the individual.
Right. It's subjective.
It's subjective.
But I think we said it earlier, the story, if you look at taking out the whole doping thing and him getting caught for that, the story of what led to that. And then I'm not sure I think he has a documentary where he flipped it and he starts to talk about why he felt like he had to cheat.
Wait, so he did Nino Brown?
Yeah.
I think so. I swear there's
sure
a documentary that came out on Netflix that talked about doping. I think, and I feel like he said something about like, yo, like I didn't watch it, but I feel like it was something in the vein of like, yo, I had like not that he had to do it, but it's kind of like taking even his gold medals and all that stuff got taken away, and then saying like, hey, like a Nino Brown situation. That's kind of a quick way of putting it. But yeah, do you think that that hurt the branding of his branding, I guess? And then we could jump into 2014 and
maybe
get halfway through. Okay.
Yeah, I feel the same way.
Yeah.
I mean, Live Strong was pretty strong,
right.
But then again, it's kind of like.
But was it on a decline by the time it got out?
I was gonna say that, right?
By the time it got out that he was doping, did people even care about Live Strong? Because I remember when everybody had the Live Strong bands,
right? But then I think even the strong part of it, like I've seen that in other places, right? So Jim Kelly is like, he had cancer, he was fighting cancer. It was like cancer, Kelly Strong, like that. Like I've kind of heard that like kind of saying or model, right? So, I don't know. Like, I think it's a combination of like, him fighting through it. So like that is one narrative per what you said. And then like kind of like falling from grace because like now all of this is like just this lie now. So it's like, what do we do with this lie? Like, do we care about it? Do we say, well, the motherfucker did have cancer. Like, you know what I mean? So it's like,
do you give a little like,
okay, question. Could he have survived that scandal in today's world versus whenever that happened back in 2013? That's 7 years ago.
I think he could have. I think he could have. I think he could survive it if the scandal blew while he was racing and while he was getting over cancer. Yes, he would have survived because people would have been like Rose just said, he has cancer. But if it was after, I don't know. I think people. It's kind of hard to say after because he wasn't racing anymore. It's not like he was doing anything that was related. Yeah, it's not like he was doing anything that was related to biking. So I think people were just like, oh, like it's just like when an Olympian. Oh shit. Yeah, my bad. It's just like when an Olympian gets caught years later after they lost their gold medals. It's
right.
Like your gold medals get pulled, but does anybody really care?
But you know what though? I feel like around that time, and I could be a little bit late to the party, but no, seriously, because I feel like in the major leagues, like they were going through this whole thing.
There was
like,
a time.
There was a time when they were going through this whole thing. So I think people were more.
People got pulled for
like so. You had like the whole Barry Bonds scandal. Then you had Mark McGwire. Then it had Jose Canseco dropping that book. Now, don't get it twisted. Like my times could be off, but
Canseco was snitching.
Yeah,
he did. Yeah,
I forgot. He snitched the motherfucker.
So the point I'm trying to make is I feel like
Brown.
I feel like people have already seen this story. Like maybe it's just in another discipline, but it's all in sports. Like cycling is something different, but it's like, yo, we've seen this story before. Like, all right, when people realize that, remember, was it Barry Bonds and Mark McGwire, and then Sammy Sosa, and then they had that like that whole now. They had.
I'm just saying, you're bleaching the skin. You're a white dude.
Yo, I didn't expect you to say that.
You're a white guy.
Yeah.
But to wrap up my point, I just feel like people have become kind of desensitized to it, like a little bit, like
the lies.
Yeah, it's like all right.
So all right, that's a good point. So it in
2013,
in
you
that
had
point,
you had no cancel culture.
In that
Well,
point, that's two good points. In 2013, did
you could get canceled by a brand, but
people's voices weren't really out. Social media wasn't as big. So people's voices weren't out there. But that's a good point. In 2013, was maybe the start of maybe the people saying like, you know what, because of this shit that you told us, we're gonna stop kind of messing with you a little bit. But they didn't have the voice at the time yet.
I feel like the reason why like a lot of these, it really doesn't matter, and like a lot of these people probably shouldn't care. I just feel like we have a culture now where it doesn't even matter if it's like real or fake. Like we have people who, have butt lifts. We have people who have like, and do people care? I don't know. Like, people really having now. The only thing is like sports, so it's like money on the line and it's like history behind it. But I mean, the grand scheme of it, I mean, so what do you put like an asterisk next to his name, or you took his medals away, and that's it? Like, I mean, what else do you can't kill the guy? Like, it is what it is.
It's weird. 2013, I don't know, man. It's weird because social was taking off. A brand could cancel you. You kind of go away, and people just forget about it. In today's world, brands don't cancel you because, fucked up news is better than no news because you're not paying for advertising. You can try to get canceled. Like, people can try to, cancel you, but nobody really get canceled, right? And people say the most outrageous shit to stay relevant, and it works. We got a president who say the most craziest shit. Dude was running.
So we're gonna get to that.
No, I'm just trying to tie it back to 2013. Like, in today's world versus back then.
And he started then because that's when Obama was president. He was
trolling the president back then in 2013.
Yeah.
Right? So it almost like you look at like 2013 as the beginning of trolling culture, I guess cancel culture from brands, but none of that shit really works. The trolling is just for getting on, and the cancel culture almost becomes like its own way of advertising to a certain degree. Like, it's kind of cool to get canceled because motherfuckers talking about you.
That's true.
So if I guess Lance Armstrong would have got canceled now, I think he'd have been a much more powerful brand now.
Interesting.
Whereas back then, he's still wearing that red scar on his back for, doping and shit like that. He probably wasn't the only one. But,
probably wasn't.
But he's still wearing that red scarlet on his back, right? Yeah. I think now it wouldn't even matter.
So just real quick, because I forgot to mention in the beginning, Instagram started in 2010.
Yeah.
Which let's put a hold on that, and let's jump on that once we get to 2015 and wrap up the first half of the 10 years, but like of the decade. But kind of jumping into 2014, funny enough, I don't really have that much info from here.
Nothing happened.
Malaysia Airlines, that's when that Malaysian airline disappeared.
Right, I remember that.
That was some wild shit.
Damn, Sean, this is some dark shit.
I'm sorry, yo. There's nothing positive that happened over the last. All right, let me find some positive stuff. Yeah, man. I mean, I'm sure.
Well, look, I can tell you.
I'm sure there's a bunch of famous stuff that happened in 2014, but I think it was a slow year. Wait, real quick. Okay. I forgot to mention this because I just want to mention this. Nelson Mandela passed in 2013. Rest in peace. And Paul Walker did too, but I don't know. It depends on if you like them or not. But all right, after your point, AD, we're gonna jump into 2015. My bad, but go ahead.
I think it's funny. 2014 was the year that I started working at a really big tech company, right? And my first assignment was working on an Apple Watch. Mind you, the Apple Watch didn't come out until 2015, but Apple talked about this product for a whole year, right? So I feel like 2014, it became cool to like talk about something for a whole year before it even dropped. Like, hey, we're gonna.
Was it out there, or was it just like, hey, we want you to work on this, but don't talk about it yet?
No, it was known that this watch was coming, but it didn't come out until 2015, right? Like early 2015. But the projects working on the actual, I guess product for Apple's product yeah, I couldn't really talk about it at the time, but it was multiple companies, developing experiences for this wearable device. But Apple literally talked about that watch for almost a year.
Yeah.
Before it came out. It wasn't just Apple. Like, people got into like a habit of like informing you about a product that's gonna come out almost
Would
like
you say
6 months to a year
would you
prior
say
to
would you
coming
say
out.
it's similar to, and if you just to so I can understand musically, it's like the album rollout. Like you start talking about the product, you start kind of seeding it places, people start trying to find photos of it. Kind of like the iPhone, early iPhone.
I guess you can say that, but it's weird because even doing that,
You start to build the hype up a little bit.
But even during that time of like, I guess the 20 teens, a lot of albums were getting like these surprise drops, right?
Yeah.
So My Beautiful Twisted Dark Fantasy in 2010 was doing Good Fridays, and it was just dropping new songs every Friday out of the blue, right? No involvement with the record labels, no marketing. It was just throw it on Twitter and go, right? That was 2010. Which led up to like 2013, 2014, whatever. Beyonce dropped her album literally out of the blue.
Oh yeah, that was, I think I wrote it down. That's in 2016, which we're gonna get to in a second.
Again, like I feel like the labels was like pivoting towards like dropping things out of the blue. Tech companies took a label approach and started taking a long time to talk about a product that was either still being developed or it was just not ready to be put out to the public, right? Because they, a lot of times they were working out the bugs, right? They're getting guys like us to come up with all these cool ideas because, Apple, they invent technology, but they have no clue how they're going to use it until they get, source ideas from like different types of developers to come up with cool stuff. Then they come out with it, right? So, yeah, that was a weird year, man. That was a very weird year in terms of like just like engagement and just technology and just marketing,
Interesting.
Yeah.
So
it was hype. A lot of hype.
A lot of hype.
A lot of hype that year.
Oh, really? Because the next year got a lot more hype. But all right, we halfway there. 2015. There's some positive things that happened in 2015. All right, 2015. Barack Obama and Raul Castro meet in Panama. First meeting of U.S. and Cuban heads of state since the Cuban Revolution. Let me go through the list, and then we could kind of jump in and pull out one or two that we think captures that year. Donald Trump launches his campaign for presidency 2015. China announces the end of their one-child policy after 35 years. Marvin Gaye's family basically won the lawsuit where they sued Robin Thicke and Pharrell about for that song Blurred Lines. And I'm sure there's a bunch of stuff that happened in 2015, but and then this last point is Miss Piggy and Kermit the Frog announced the end of their relationship on Twitter.
Man.
But here's the thing, not important at that year, but if you think about that relationship ending on Twitter and Donald Trump starting his presidency, people start to go to social media,
a lot more
to start to
for
plug their
news,
marketing
for everything, news.
So let's talk about that a little bit. 2015 is halfway through the decade, and you start to see brands and people talk a lot more on social. Even though these social platforms existed, people start to pull a lot more. I'm pretty sure there's a bunch of brands and people who probably started before that. But
it was a tipping point.
Yeah.
It was a bit disruptive. Like, if you think about it, right? Like, we talked about Trump and trolling the president. Like, when has a president been like trolled like that? Like,
Never.
From a public,
Never.
Like publicly like that, right? Like,
Never.
Yeah.
So, that was, you look at things like, wow, that's different, right? And it's like, all right, yeah, like, you're not doing a good job. I can do a better job than you, and I'm going to show you. I'm going to show and prove, right? So, like, he stood on his words from which was, if you laugh at it or not, it is what it is, right? Then, I don't know, another one stuck out to me is Kermit and Miss Piggy, right? Like, so as a child and you grow up and you're like watching this and you probably don't even think about them. I never even thought about them being together like that as a child, but like now you hear it on Twitter and it's like this big thing. I remember that year was like a it was a huge thing.
I thought Miss Piggy was a little thirsty. In my opinion.
Right. Well, I mean, maybe, but I didn't hear him claiming. He wasn't cuffing it. He wasn't cuffing it. You know what I'm saying? So,
oh my god.
Or maybe he was behind, like when no one else was looking. You know what I mean? So, but what I'm saying is, it's like that takes you back to your childhood, right? Yeah. Automatically, it's like, wow, like my childhood is kind of disrupted a little bit because, like, I didn't even care to think enough about this, but now everyone's talking about it, and was this around the time, and I could be stepping out of pocket a little bit, with the memes with the Kermit and like with the tea, and it's like that ain't my business.
I think it's about right.
It might be close to that time. Yeah.
I mean, but that's another thing that's another thing that kind of like lived on social. And it's like, it just became this thing that started from your childhood. Like, you saw it one way. Yeah. And now it's like a whole different way. So.
No, I agree. It's weird because I guess I saw Piggy and Kermit like that uncle and aunt who was not married, but that, oh, this is my uncle and this is his wife, but they was like common law.
Right.
So the Kermit the Frog meme, allegedly, according to online, started around 2014.
Okay.
So,
but it kind of lived out.
Yeah.
And the last thing I was gonna say is like Obama meeting with Castro. Like that is something that is kind of like disruptive to the process that we've known in the last 50 something years. Because that was the beginning of people able to go to Cuba.
Which I haven't done yet.
Back and forth to Cuba from the United States.
It's difficult now.
No, it's difficult now, but it's like one of those things that kind of like, wow, like
Trump, I think Trump reversed that.
Well, of course.
But that it's funny that you say that because that year when he launched that, I remember myself and a bunch of people that I knew that I was friends with in advertising were like, "Yo, we're gonna go to Cuba," because I think it was like, and this is jumping in close to 2016. When Trump was like kind of winning, and we were like, yo, you don't know what's going to happen with the law next year, so do it while it's super easy now, and then later on we'll figure it out. And then lo and behold, Trump won.
Well, let's talk about what 45? That's him, 45. Whatever. I don't have to be correct on this.
Right.
I don't give a fuck. Right.
Yeah.
I don't have to be accurate about him, but whatever. He's been on a campaign, bro, since before he became president, and he has not come off that campaign. Since he started trolling like Barack, he's been more or less campaigning to be this, and he's still campaigning ever since then. So it's amazing how you take this idea of a troll, which can be turned into like a way to engage, people or fans or your constituents or your followers, however you want to call it, and turn it into something that's somewhat negative into a positive.
Right.
Especially with, obviously, technology, with Cambridge Analytica, obviously with, the media, and, and just with him, right? So you got trolling, influencer culture, technology, and this idea of the perpetual antagonist.
Right.
Right? That becomes what we call social media now.
Yeah. So real quick, just because I want to wrap up this part one, the first half of the decade, and we could jump into part two. I like that you said that, because just to go back to Instagram started in 2010, and Twitter was invented before that, but it starts to blow up a lot more in the
because of the image.
in the early 2010s.
Yeah.
This start of super influencers and influencer culture, which we talked about before. Yeah. How does that start to influence marketing? Like the influencer culture. Again, looking at it in hindsight, so it's easy to talk about. But you start seeing brands saying, "Hey, I'm gonna give my product to this person who has a following to talk about it." And I guess in the middle of the decade, and then we'll jump into it in the later half and see how it has blown up.
Right.
Now go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good point. I mean, and all I could think about was like when AD was talking, and as you start to bring this topic up, was like social engineering, right? Like I feel like Trump is like, no matter how you feel about him, like as far as like a social engineer, from a social engineering and influencer base, like he kind of leads the charge, because if you look at how he started and then how he even got into the conversation, just saying the craziest shit. It's like, I have the money. I'm going to go do this. Right? And he kind of did it, which opened up the eyes to other people, to younger people or whoever's on these platforms, saying like, wow, you have a person who is like, just goes his own way. He says what he wants to say. He has a little bit of paper, and now he's running the country.
Yeah.
I could do that.
But it's okay, and it's funny you say that, right? Because the only reason why that's able to actually happen in like social media, mostly because social media is not regulated. Right? So you look at like old media, like I'm not gonna say old media, but traditional media, highly regulated. TV, print, radio. You
FCC,
can't.
everybody looking at it.
If you put out advertising, you have to say this is advertising, right? If this is media related around journalism, you have to say, well, this is a column from the New York Times.
Right.
In today's world, the influencer, you can't tell between if it's a real messaging or
I would say legal
saying some bullshit, right? And that's dangerous.
But legal just caught up with that.
But the problem with that, bro, is like
because now you have to kind of say.
Well, anybody can say anything and get put on. And now these motherfuckers are getting into like positions of power.
Well, that's the good and the bad.
And the only thing is, I think to that point, like we kind of led up to it, but now you're starting to see how like the tides are like changing a little bit because like Farrakhan got like they kicked him off Twitter. They say, you know what I mean? Like
and Alex Jones.
If you
want to look at the opposite.
But your president who say crazy shit is still on Twitter.
But I
and
think,
because I feel like we all chopped it up about this, like, and we looked at how many followers, right? Because we spoke about how many followers does Trump have on Twitter, and maybe this is another conversation, right?
I think that builds up. I think that's
a part two.
That's a part two that gets to the climax of when you get to super influencers.
Yeah.
But I think what we're talking about right now is like
I'll hold on
the build up to get to that,
right?
Because what I was gonna say is if you look at these people just come to mind. They're not all the same, but if you look at people like Mark Zuckerberg, a Donald Glover, a Issa Rae, maybe a Donald Glover and Issa Rae are better examples of people who kind of started building their brand and putting their creativity out on their own, and then you start to see them build up, and then I think Rose, I don't know what year this is, but I remember you told us a story of like one time in a meeting you pitched Issa Rae to work with a company you work with, and then you or you mentioned it. I don't know if you pitched it, or also you mentioned like a Donald Glover, and at the time the people who had like this old school mentality were like, nah, we don't really mess with them.
Yeah.
We
did the same thing. Ava DuVernay. I tried to bring Ava DuVernay to the agency. Me and Shadow.
Yeah,
and
which is crazy because now you try to get her.
Try to get her now. I'll go for it. But and she loved the ideas, but old thinking.
Yeah, right.
But I think that's the point. Just to wrap up this, the first half of the decade is that like you start to see this changing of the guard,
right?
Of you not having to go and also and not even looking at Trump in a negative, but like he takes the changing of the guard and not having. He doesn't need to own New York Times. He doesn't need to own Fox.
Nah.
He'll just go on Twitter and say what he wants to say, and I think it's an innovative way of looking at marketing yourself and your brand.
And influence is probably the most powerful tool, like more than money.
It is.
When you can sway a group of people's, like you could capture their attention, you can sway them in a direction to make them believe in whatever you're saying. That's powerful, bro. Like money can't buy that.
That's true.
I mean, you think in theory,
but it's hard to replicate when it's natural. I get what you're saying.
Right. With Kamala Harris,
right.
Right now,
exactly.
Right? She ran out of money. She literally ran out of money, and she can't build her influencer. I guess impact.
Yeah, impact.
Right. So yeah, it's real.
So I mean, I like that point, and we're gonna kind of wrap up the first half of the decade talk with the Ab Bros. My brother Easy Rose are gonna sign us out, and catch us on part 2 of a decade with the Ad Bros.
Yeah, man. Easy Rose, Ad Bros. No self talk when it comes to telling the truth.
All right, peace.
Peace.